Hello, Steve89. Well, I did a review of all the Friday the 13th films, the first 8 and then the Jason films the other day, because every Friday the 13th I watch all the films, and I do watch the remake, but I didn't include it in the review, partly because it doesn't really fit, but also because I wanted to keep it under 30 minutes. It was already at like 27 minutes. So I just sort of finished it off and didn't actually review it. But I sort of thought I wanted to do a separate review of it because it's probably the most confusing film out of the whole series. Now, what's wrong with the film? Okay, when I first saw it in the cinema, I did like it. I felt it was very visceral, it was very violent, it was very aggressive. It was kind of a strong horror movie in that sense, but didn't really feel like a Friday the 13th film. And when you look at the Jasons and the different Jasons, there's sort of 3 different Jasons. Well, there's the first Jason, which is the boy who's a figment of Alice's imagination, really. The second one is this sort of wild animal running around the woods, the baghead. And he sort of morphs into the hockey mask Jason in the 3rd film and really comes to form, I guess, in the 4th film, where he's sort of got this Frankenstein sort of imposing, slow, methodical sort of way about him, and he's kind of mysterious. He sort of, he sort of comes back from the dead. You don't really understand. There's a mystery about him. You're sort of trying to work out what he is and how he works. Whereas the later Jason, which Kane Hodder sort of defined, had a real physicality about him. Like he had the deep breathing, and his head would turn first and then his body, and he had all these characteristics which were very interesting and creative, but he really just felt to me like you didn't have to wonder why he was doing what he was doing. You could tell that he was a killer, and he was angry, and he was out for revenge, and there's really no mystery about the character. There's sort of a power in that aggression and everything, and the sort of characteristics and that he put to the character sort of became sort of identified with that character, but he'd lost that sort of mysterious, sort of lumbering Frankenstein sort of what is he, how is he, sort of, that element was sort of gone. And I didn't really appreciate that back in the day. I kind of got on the Kane Hodder boat and sort of like, Kane Hodder is Jason, and I was really offended when they didn't reuse him or invite him back to be in Jason versus Freddy, which he originally was. Apparently he got the script, but then things changed, and no one can decide on that, why that went that way. But they went with a different Jason, and they went back to that sort of tall, lumbering, sort of dumb animal, sort of, you don't quite know why he's doing what he's doing or how he's doing what he's doing. And I find that is really who Jason is, and that's the more interesting sort of performance, the more interesting portrayal of Jason than the aggressive, angry. And this just takes the aggressive, angry Kane Hodder version of Jason and takes it to another level, because basically what happened was they did a remake of not Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre was this ugly, gritty, dirty, nasty, cheap little horror film that it wasn't really scary or fun. It was just disturbing, and you just didn't want to be in that space. And that's sort of not the sort of horror that I like. And they sort of remade that, and they sort of put more of a Hollywood shine on it, but it still was that sort of dirty, gritty, rednecks out in the country, sort of gross sort of horror movie. And of course that did well, so they looked around and said, well, what other IPs can we rape? Oh, there's Jason, let's get him. So they take that and they basically use the same approach, and it's just like rednecks in the country, and he gets his mask from this guy who's like licking porn magazines and having sex with mannequins and just deplorables basically, and it just doesn't really work for me. And I mean, they do some interesting things where they cover the first 3 films in the one film, but then that just means they reduce the first film to a credit sequence, which is really insulting to the first film and fans of the first film, and Pamela Voorhees and Nana Visitor, who played her in this. They really should have given her a post-credit scene and then just had the title come up or something, instead of doing a basic credit scene and having that scene play under it in black and white. It just really does a disservice to the character and everything. Then the first part of the film is Baghead running around, and then he kills this guy, but he kills him two different ways. One way, he cut his head off while he was wearing the mask, and he just had the mask in his hand and put it on. The other one, he kills him, and then he just finds the mask and puts it on and looks in the mirror, and it has a couple of interesting moments, and the violence of his character is scary, but it's not the same way. It sort of hits you in the moment, but then you don't sort of go back to it. You're not thinking about it. It doesn't stay with you. It gives you nothing to sort of contemplate or ponder, like who, how, where, what Jason is. Here he's just like a violent killer. And there's also no mystery about how he pops up everywhere. They literally explain that by having a series of tunnels under the campgrounds, which I don't know if it was a mine or what, but so they even took that out of it. It's like what they did with Halloween. They did the same thing with Halloween, where they took this mysterious shape and just turned him into this abused kid who grows up and kills people. And they just made it totally trashy, totally just bogan is what we call it in Australia, or deplorable, or whatever you want to call it. They're just horrible, gross, skanky characters. And it's this sort of horror where you just don't want to be there. Not the other films they sort of took, as they've said, American Pie and the Pepsi generation, and turned it on its head, where you could relate to those people, and that was like the world that you're in, and then something bad happens to them. That was relatable. This is a world I've never lived in. I've never lived in this sort of, like, where do these people exist? Where does this exist? Probably in some towns out in somewhere in America, somewhere that I've never been and will never go. So it just, in some ways it kind of works, in some ways it doesn't. It doesn't work as a Friday the 13th film, I don't think. I do tend to watch it, but it's always after I've watched all the other films, and I'm usually watching it when I'm basically falling asleep, because that's usually what Friday the 13th Part 5 and this is for. It's sort of the last film I put on each night when I do my marathons, because every Friday the 13th I do a marathon of all the films, and after 12 on Thursday I do the first 5, and then sometimes I stay awake till the end of the Friday the 13th Part 5. But I do have a version of it that someone made where they actually cut out all the Hubbard scenes, so it's a little shorter and a bit more enjoyable, because I hate those scenes. Because again, it's like, that's probably the only time that they had those sort of characters in Friday the 13th. And we won't even go into that, but I think there's some correlation between the filmmaker and these sort of films as well, as that is why they had them in there. But it just doesn't really work for me. And the DVD only has a small amount of special features as well. I sort of always because if you're going to create a new universe, you need to at least explain and justify it to the fans. And they don't do a lot of that. And you can't blame the actors, the actual, the teens, the kids who get killed. They're not bad. They do their best job to portray the characters. And there was a lot of reshoots and things that, like, they go through this to their discredit in the special features, where when the girl gets hit with the boat and she's out in the water, Jason just stands by the side of the lake and she just drowns rather than swimming. She's out there treading water for hours because she just isn't even going to try and get past him, and she ends up drowning. That is a psychological murder. That's interesting. How they kill her in the film, she hides under the walkway that goes out to the lake, and then he knows exactly where she is, of course, and sticks a knife through the wood, stabs her in the head, then pulls the knife up, and she pops up out of the water, exposes her breasts, and then the knife pulls out and she falls back under the water again. It's just an excuse to have breasts on the screen. There's nothing clever about it, nothing terrifying about it. The idea of just being stuck in the water and just having to just drown rather than get past the person, you got no way out. He just follows you around the edge. You can't swim faster than he can walk. It was terrifying, but so that's sort of the way the film goes. So the only good thing about it is like the black guy's kind of hot, but then he gets an axe in the back, which is not nice to see. And the DVD did have 2 covers, so. But yeah, I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think of the film. I do watch it. I also like it for Jared Padalecki, or whatever his name is, because, he's hot and, he's from Supernatural. So I do watch it every year. And it's not bad as a film itself, but it is lacking something. Much like the same thing for Amityville. They just went so far away, and mostly it's licensing. Mostly it's they know that if they make it different enough from the original, they can create their own merchandise and they don't have to pay the people who created the original designs or the original things. So they did the same thing for Amityville, where they went so far away from the original story, it really shouldn't have the based on a true story. And that's why they got sued by George Lutz, the original guy who lived in the Amityville house, because they went so far away from the original story and they had him killing his own dog and all this sort of stuff. None of it ever happened. And the story about the house, they basically were supposed to have rebuilt a recreation of the house, but then they had supposedly, there was bad weather so they couldn't do it, so they'd find another house that was different. They really just wanted a different house so they could have their own Amityville house that was unique for this film. So I don't believe anything they said about that now, because I've sort of realised how these things work. But I'm really going to go this time. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Again, let me know what you think of the film, if you like it or not. Thanks. Bye.